All righty, welcome to technical session number 38. Troubleshooting Windows. Within this technical session, we're going to be going over the various issues that you might experience while working with Windows, and there are many, and potential solutions and how to work on them. So we're going to identify common issues that come up, troubleshooting applications to use, and when to diagnose the issue. Describe how to resolve common issues using the appropriate troubleshooting tools, and name which system utility, administrative tool, or command line to use for a given scenario. For this particular technical session, the behavior skills and mindsets we're going to be employing are persistence and teamwork. I know all of them are critical, but in an enterprise environment, IT professionals, you do not work alone. You work in a team. No one person can know all things about IT. If they tell you they do, they are lying. So within your IT team, you will have varying skill sets. Some will be better at networking. Some will be better at troubleshooting. Some will be better at Linux. Some will be better at hardware. Lean on these individuals for their skills and learn from them what you can. And persistence. Even if we are not able to solve a problem, we need to continue on and find out how that solution came to be, what symptoms keyed that person in, how they fixed it, so that we can add that to our toolbox and add to our knowledge base and our value as a team member. How often is command line used in help desk position? Not often, only about 70% of the day or so. But you'll become more and more comfortable with it as we work through. So, overview. As you seem extremely excited about this one, Stephen, can you read first, please?
Yeah. Problems with an operating system usually affect the overall operation of the computer. Learning how to identify and troubleshoot some of the most common operating system issues is a huge percentage of what PC repair techs do on a daily basis. Software is a complex and multifaceted. Additionally, there are many places where things can go wrong. This makes operating systems one of the most confusing components to troubleshoot. With the proper plan of action and good backup, you can approach these problems with confidence.
It's easy to take risks when you have everything backed up. Just saying. All right, so common symptoms that require OS troubleshooting. Here's a veritable list that we're going to be going through, from your both side errors to devices that fail to start or be detected, spontaneous shutdowns, compatibility errors, and so on and so on. But we will kind of be going through each one of these and giving you some steps to work on troubleshooting them. And I know what you're asking. Do we have labs on stuff like this? You're in luck. We do have labs. All right. Blue screen of death. Anybody who has ever worked on a Windows machine for any length of time is intimately familiar with this particular screen, also called the BOSOD error. This typical error occurs when processes running in the kernel mode encounter a problem and Windows must hard stop. Now, nice thing about it is, within the blue screen, it's not just a generic thing that gives you the exact same message every single time. Within it, it will give you a specific number as to the type of error you're experiencing. You can look that number up, and it will tell you basically where you would start your troubleshooting process. Here is a website you can go to that will aid in this. Won't spend too much time on it, but it helps you search those numbers, and then it'll give you potential places to look for errors or how to solve these particular problems. Here's a few of them that you might see. Inaccessible boot device, missing drivers, and then you need to update or install the driver. So it kind of gives you a list as to the error, what the error actually means, and potential solutions that you can use. Tools to troubleshoot both side errors. First one, obviously, it gives you that error code within the blue screen. Search the error code, find out what it means. Other things you can look for is other places you can look. Event viewer. This is where all of your logs are kept. Remember, everything we do on a computer is logged at some point. Any major events that happen on a computer, crashes, systems, failing, things like that. A lot of that is also kept in logs. So event viewer is where a lot of this stuff is. And you can go in there and look and see what applications were affected first, or if it was just a singular application that caused the error. And this will aid you in that troubleshooting process. On a larger scale in networks, it allows you to figure out what systems were infected first to figure out where the security breach happened, if it was like a virus coming in or something along those lines. If it's not able to detect devices or the devices fail to start, something like that, Windows updates and patches to the operating system may aid in this process, as it may just be the system hasn't updated properly, and this is why it is unable to speak to that device. System restore, if you did an update and now systems are not able to work, you can always roll back the clock, undo the updates you've done, and kind of go back to where you were. Memory diagnostics, check and make sure your memory modules are working properly, and check disk to go through the hard drive for errors. And if the errors are found, it can either try to repair or quarantine those areas. All right. As one of the first things you would do in a troubleshooting process may be to restart, not always, but a good portion of the time. And that is when that both side error may appear. That's where you would get that useful information. Sometimes it happens really, really fast. Like that blue screen may be up there for only less than a second. Pro tip, use your phone, record a video of the computer booting. Then you can pause it and look at the error. Undoing your recent changes. So the system restore is helpful. And then check archive messages in the action center to see if there were warnings of possible malware or other virus infections. Questions so far? All right. Failure to boot. So when a computer essentially fails to boot, it's necessary to determine whether the problem relies in hardware or software. So in the screen, the operating system hasn't even loaded at all. So the problem essentially is hardware related or the incorrect boot order in the BIOS. So you go to the BIOS first, check your boot order, and it may be looking in the wrong location for the operating system. Like if you're booting off of a Pixie server or something like that, and you don't have the server properly identified in your BIOS, it doesn't know to go look there. You'll get a blank screen like this because it's going to be only looking locally and not able to locate where the actual operating system is. All right. For tools you may need to utilize for troubleshooting this, the WinRe or Windows Recovery Environment. You can access this through booting from the Windows installation media and select repair. You can also, using repair your computer option in advanced boots, in advanced boot options, you can set this up as well. And also using a system repair disk that you may have created before the problems occur. When, excuse me, when you first install it, it says, do you want to create a system repair disk? It's not a bad idea to go ahead and do something like that and kind of set it aside for a rainy day. I understand these are tools that we don't think about or realize we need them until just after we need them. But now that we're getting into the IT field, we need to start planning a little bit ahead when it comes to stuff like this. All right. Other failure to boot areas you can work with, like with Mac and Linux. So in Mac OS, you need to get to the recovery environment, which is Command R at the boot. And this will enable you to do a full reset, but it also gives you other tools for troubleshooting as well. So as you're booting up Mac, Command R at the same time. Linux has two. They have Grub and Lilo. Grub is pretty much the most common. And if Grub gets corrupted or deleted, it'll basically give you a missing Grub error message. It does not mean the computer's hungry. It means it cannot boot. Questions so far? And you may have to re-download Grub to your system to correct this. All right, here is a picture essentially of the Windows recovery environment, or WinRe. You have the option for system restore, system image recovery, your startup repair, go back to a previous build, startup settings, and you can go straight into the command prompt for further troubleshooting if you wish. All right. So if you are reinstalling it or doing a repair, you put in your repair disk, it will give you a few options here. And one of the main ones you may be asked to do in your performance-based would be a repair installation. Did you have that one, Mark?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Lilo is another version of Grub. Grub is the most popular, Stephen. All right. Improper shutdowns, power outages, things like that. If you don't have a UPS, things like that. So a rogue system will begin automatically shutting down or restarting while in use. So there are viruses that may do this to help kind of install themselves further into your system. Will force a restart. And while it could be indicative of a hardware problem like power supply, something along those lines, it can also indicate a misconfiguring problem. So, you know, areas in hardware that can cause it: memory. If it doesn't have enough memory, it can overload the system, system crashes. Motherboard itself, it's not able to transfer power properly. If it has blown capacitors, things like that, it will not function properly. And if the components can't communicate with each other, system shuts down. CPU, things like if it overheats, some of those issues also would sure to, you know, cause a crash. Video cards, and then obviously system overheating in general. So when these errors start occurring, you check your event viewer and look event viewer and look for hardware errors or hardware failures. Because again, event viewer is where all your logs are kept. That question gets asked in so many different ways. Where do you go to look for something like this? Event viewer. Apply any patches that may have come out recently. Use your memory diagnostics and check this to see if it is your memory or your hard drive. And then if it's overheating, go to the BIOS setup, check the temperature of the CPU. Should not exceed 38 degrees Celsius. If you have recently done some work on your PC and you removed the heatsink from the CPU, either you did not put thermal paste on it, or the thermal paste was like old and brittle, and as you removed it and put it back on, it kind of crumbled and is no longer functioning properly. All right. Next, endless shutdowns and restarts. If you're caught in an endless cycle of restarts, boot into safe mode. Because essentially when you boot into safe mode, none of the drivers are loaded. It looks like a really, really old version of Windows, like none of the upgrades, none of the bells and whistles are working. It's literally the bare minimum operating system. So you can actually start troubleshooting and turning things on one by one if you wish to see where the problem is occurring, or being able to go in and look at logs and effectively work at it from there. So you can go in, check your Windows settings, and then go through your start menu and see what's booting up at start. Start negating anything that does not need to be starting up. Because as we talked about earlier, when you install new programs, a lot of times, just for your convenience, they make it so that that program boots up at start. And when you start having dozens of these programs added that all boot up at start, it slows things down and eventually can overload the system, putting you into this cycle. All right. Devices that fail to start or are not detected. So usually when this occurs, it tends to be a driver issue. And as we've stated before, drivers are what essentially, mini programs that allow or that tell the system how to communicate with the device that you're utilizing. Sometimes you may have basic drivers already loaded, and then you just need to install the more detailed drivers in order to get full functionality. Sometimes, if it's a newer type of device, you will have no basic drivers installed, but they will give you a little disk or something along the lines to load the basic drivers, and then you would go to their website and then download the full drivers, or they'll give you instructions to go to their main website and go ahead and download the drivers at that point before you install the device. All of this can be updated essentially in the device manager. So in the properties dialog box, you'll see the main things. You'll have the general, which displays the device type, manufacturer, location of where that device is. And it will basically tell you whether or not the device is working properly. The driver displays the current driver that is operating on the system. If that is not accurate, you may need to go download the upgraded driver version. Resources shows the system resources in use, the input, output, IRQ, so on, and whether there are any conflicts in working with these particular resources. All right. So there you go. So if the problem is with the device error or device driver, updated driver versions will typically alleviate whatever symptoms you're having or the failure to start. You would download it, install the proper drivers. Sometimes this may require you restarting the systems. So, but there may be some where you install a new driver, but it's not compatible, say, with the operating system you have. This does happen on Macs because at a certain point, you're not allowed to update your operating system. So new drivers may actually negate your ability to use that device. So you'd have to roll back to older versions. Although thankfully, many manufacturers will have a catalog of older versions so you can go back to one that actually works for you and utilize that one. And there is also, if you've downloaded one and it doesn't work, you can also use the rollback driver option in your device manager to go back to the previous version you were using where everything worked. All right, here's a quick snapshot of a troubleshooting report. All right. Symptoms of a DLL message. One of the most useful errors you can get is indicating a missing DLL file. This is really nice because it lets you know exactly what is missing. And DLL files are essentially utilized by various components. If they're missing or corrupted, you will get an error message that basically says, you know, this one right here, not working so good, and you can go in and replace it. Some people go in and, you know, will manipulate DLL files for, you know, certain purposes, not necessarily nefarious. I will say, do not mess with these unless you are thoroughly experienced or you are learning on a machine that is not critical, because you can do a lot of damage messing around with DLL files. Dynamic link library. So, but if you have one missing, you can copy one from another system that is on the identical patch level as yours and put it in the exact same location and solve that problem. The location of the dynamic link library or the location of the file? DLL would be in the command line. And you can actually pull it up through there. All right, so most applications have many small programs called components that serve the main program. These small components service often have a .dll extension on their files for, again, dynamic link library. Whenever an error message occurs about a missing DLL, reinstall that application or recover it from backup or from the application installation files. And if the DLL is missing, the relationship between that program and that component may be broken. So you can use a Microsoft Management Console snap-in called Component Services to register your components. And on older versions, you use the reg svr.32.exe program to register the component itself. All right, so if a service fails to start, this could be resource conflicts. It could be, you know, too many operations running at once. Resources have already been used up. and it's not able to get what it needs in order to start. Also could be just that the service itself has been misconfigured. Starting to sound like a broken record here. First place you would go to look for something like this would be Event Viewer. And look for an event ID of 7000 with a source of the service control manager. Also, you want to check your service console just to make sure that the service is set to start automatically. And likely how you would fix this, if it's a persisting issue, would be to uninstall and reinstall the application that's causing the problems. Because it could have been a bad install originally, and it's just not working. Removing it, reinstalling it may fix the issues. Compatibility error. So some applications, we talked about this earlier, function off of older systems. And if the architecture of those systems has changed drastically, they may not function on newer ones. Example of this being Windows XP. And those may run into severe problems trying to run on newer versions like 7, 8, 8.1, 10. Or even older. If it was on NT, it would have problems with 95 or 98, although we wouldn't see many of those nowadays. Typically, your offending one will be XP programs, but they have applications where you can run in XP mode and then be able to function on those applications as well. So current versions allow for running in XP mode because a lot of enterprise companies didn't necessarily reprogram older systems to work on the newer Windows. So this mode allows them essentially to function in XP mode and continue to use older programs without spending lots and lots of money to update it to newer versions. Because when you have small to mid-sized companies, creating your own software in-house costs a lot of money, not to mention maintenance costs, things like that. So this gives them a good workaround for some time, especially if there is zero issue with the software. Like it has a simple job. It does it well. There's no sense spending a whole bunch of money reinventing the wheel when we already have everything we need out of this one. So this little modification will definitely help with that. All right, next, you can set the application to run as administrator. Some older applications may run in the security context of an administrator to function. So you may be able to get a workaround in this sense, but this would be a short-term solution, not necessarily a long-term one. All right, slow system performance. This will probably be one of the most common ones you will receive because people will call and say, my system's just not working the way it used to. So this can come from many issues. One of the first things you would want to check essentially is run a virus scan, see if the computer itself has a virus. Viruses have a tendency to chew up resources because they will be replicating themselves quite often and infecting as many systems as they can. But if you're going to do this, you need a virus scan that operates externally, like a CD or DB drive, or a network virus scan. Obviously, please don't use a free one off the internet. That's just going to make issues worse most often. So you need an external source because viruses today can essentially infect the virus scanner itself, ironically, and then tell the virus scanner to skip over it when scanning for viruses. So you could sit there and say, well, I've scanned my system a couple dozen times. I chose no viruses, but that just may mean that your virus scanner is infected itself and not looking for that particular virus. Another one is over time, systems become slow because of reading and writing to the drive. system files get fragmented. They're written all over the place instead of in contiguous sectors. So it takes longer for the read-write head to read any information or write any information to it. So you would need to defragment your hard drive, and this should help speed it up quite a bit. If you have a mechanical drive, this should be part of your regular maintenance schedule. You should be doing this probably once a month at minimum to kind of keep systems working smoothly. And you need, I believe, at least 25% of open drive space in order to actually defragment, because of its being able to rewrite something to a new sector and have enough space to operate. So you need at least about 25% free space on your drive in order to do this. Check the space. What would you say, Mark?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, 25% is correct. Need
Okay.
space to move stuff around so you can so the defrag can happen.
Excellent. I didn't know if it was 25 or 15. So 25. When you start exceeding that, things start slowing down pretty heavily. Check your space on the hard drive when the partition or volume where the operating system located becomes full. Performance will suffer drastically. Yes, Cynthia.
Sorry, you said 25 when it comes to defragmentation on the hard drive, you mentioned 25%
Free space.
Free
Yeah.
space. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, empty space so that you're able to write to a new sector, putting everything together as it should be. All right, next, make sure the latest updates are installed, especially security patches and hot fixes. And make sure that is completely up to date. Again, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit before. In an enterprise setting, before you go installing updates, you need to make sure they're not going to affect current systems. So you have to test it in a sandbox environment in order to make sure you're not going to disrupt operations. Once you're pretty sure it's not going to do that, then you can roll it out to the other systems. Now, you can also go into Task Manager and something like this. If you're actively experiencing slowdowns, you can look in there to see which process is chewing up the most amount of memory, or if the CPU is simply just locked up. And if necessary, you can go ahead and end the process. If you do not recognize what that process is, look it up before you kill it. Make sure you're not shutting down a key program. So if it doesn't look familiar, make sure you look it up. All right. Application issues. So your problems with your applications may be caused by the application itself, in which case you probably uninstall and reinstall it. The hardware you're operating on, the operating system may not be compatible with that application. Data you're trying to utilize, other applications on your system that may be in conflict with that particular one. A good example of that is if you have two antivirus installed on your computer and running, they view each other as a virus. And so they actually start working in overdrive time, trying to fight the other. So if you have two antivirus running, it can chew up almost all of your computer resources in almost no time. They don't work in co-op. And of course, user error is a potential for this one as well. So, a few steps here for solving application errors. First, interview the user and backup data. So you ask a series of open-ended questions to try to identify the problem, right? In that process, try a reboot, see if that solves the problem or if that gives you temporary, reprieve. And then if the system reemerges, that gives you more information to go on. Error messages. The web and logs might help. So if you've received any error messages, you can look them up. If it is a particular type of issue you're having, forums, your best coworker, Google, or whatever your preferred search engine is, YouTube videos, what have you, you can go and look these things up. The more precise you are with your language, the more effective your searches are going to be. So we will talk about this later, searching, I can't connect to the internet versus my DHCP server is down. One will give you thousands of possibilities. The other will give you much more targeted solutions to your problem. So understanding exactly what you're searching, being precise with your language will make you a much more effective Googler. If you're in Windows 8 or 7, check your Action Center and see if any notifications had been pushed through in recent past. Check your event viewer for logs to see if there's any hardware crashes or things like that that are related to around the times that these problems are occurring. And then move on to your next step. Consider the data or the application itself is corrupted. The application settings may be incorrect. And then uninstall, reinstall the application, see if that fixes your problem. Next, look at potential outside interference. That would be your viruses. And what they mean by outside, they mean outside the application. So it could be viruses, it could be system resources are low. Another application might be interfering with it. Service may have failed to start itself. You could have bad memory modules where you think you have 16 gigs of memory, but one memory module has failed, so you're only operating off of 8. So that could affect running systems. Corrupted hard drive does happen. So you can run your check disk to see if you have bad sectors, if they can be repaired and or quarantined. And then again, another program conflicting with it that may be running in the background. Next, consider Windows might be the problem. So some applications may not be designed to work well with Windows. They may be originally designed to be a Mac or Linux program, and they've just done like a patch or some way to portal it over, and that doesn't work quite as well. But there may be also updates that have come out to help fix whatever problems that are with Windows settings versus what is required by the application itself. And use your file system checker to verify and replace any system files that may have been corrupted, deleted, or moved from a virus. And then all else fails if the application had worked prior but doesn't work now after recent updates, use your system restore to turn back the clock on your system settings. Questions so far? We get some serious experts, Mark. This is awesome. A+ is all around.
Let's take the test tomorrow.
All right. Hanging applications. I'm sure we have all experienced this. We're working in something and it just literally just freezes. At this point, you're going to go into Task Manager, look up that particular program, kill it. If the task manager itself can't end it, use your task list to get the PID right here. And then from the command line, we can utilize the Taskkill command and then the process ID in order to identify that specific process. Because it may be something, and this is where it gets critical that you know which PID it is, because you may have 25 instances of Chrome up if your name happens to be Marvin. So you may have 25 instances of Chrome up, but only one is acting up. The others are fine. It's just this one that's acting up won't end, won't unfreeze. So you get the PID out of Task Manager or in your task list to find out which one is hung up. You know which one is hung up. You can kill that single instance of Chrome and you won't have to end all the others. So it's very targeted because you can tell it to end a particular application. Like you can tell it to kill Chrome, but you'll kill all instances of Chrome versus just the specific PID of that one instance that you need to get rid of. So PID, far more targeted versus just saying end this particular application. Is there a lab for this? Yes, there is. There's also a fun one in Linux, in Coursera, that they do this too. So they walk you through it. All right, file fails to open. Yes, Cynthia.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear that the task list it's more of a specific process to zone in on that particular application hang. And then Taskkill command just kills all processes in the process, meaning if you have a few processes running, it's just gonna just shut everything, kill everything.
Well, task list will tell you everything that's running.
Okay.
So all that's running, and everything that's running gets a process ID. So you can, use Taskkill and just say that particular application, which is kind of like a sledgehammer version. It's going to kill all instances of that application, or you can be more surgical in your approach and use the Taskkill plus the PID, which is essentially using a scalpel just to stop that one piece that's affecting you.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate that.
Not a problem. All right. Files that fail to open. Exceedingly frustrating. So you may have a file, but not the application downloaded. Like, you may have a resume from, 1995. It was an awesome resume. You spent a lot of money working it up. Has all your, your important deets in it. And you sit there and say, you know what? I'm going to go back to that resume. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to update it to new stuff. But you've moved on from Microsoft Word, left them in the dust. There's a lot better programs out there to use. You go to open this program up, you can't. So you don't have Microsoft Word. So the application may not be installed itself, or the file extension you have on the end might be outdated, could be incorrect, could have been saved improperly. A program associated with that file extension is called a default program. All right. And the data sources open database connectivity tool can be used to allow files to be connected to applications they normally would not use, essentially converting them for use. Wonderful thing if, say, you were a big Apple fan and then you wanted to move over to Android and you wanted to convert over all of your iTunes stuff, you could do that. Or vice versa, if you're a big Android fan and you want to convert to Apple, you can use file converters to switch back over as well. All right. You can also change the program used to open that particular file. Many of you may have experienced trying to open up like a JPEG or something like that, and it gives you a list of programs that might be able to open up something with that file extension. So you might be able to use Paint, you might be able to use Photos or something like that, depending on what your intentions are with it, whether you just want to look at it or you want to edit it or whatever. You can select whichever program is closest to the type of program you would have originally used. And so generally they'll give you a suggested list. That doesn't mean that's the only ones that can open it. It just means that from a cursory search from their perspective, based on file extensions, this is what it can use. So it may offer up suggestions for you on this. All right. The reason we're all here. Common troubleshooting tools. So we're going to be going over each of these real quick. We have our BIOS, UEFI, memory diagnostics, et cetera, system recovery options, Windows 32, or 64-bit patches, things like that. So we're going to be walking through these pretty quickly. Lots of good info here. Always wonderful when I yank out my headset because I can't hear anything. It's that downfall when you talk with your hands, you tend to knock things away. Yes, Jerusalem.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand one of the lines here on these task list. So what does it mean when it commands versus when it uses the process?
Which one are you talking about in here?
Yeah, on the very bottom two lines, it says a command returns and then a command uses the process. What does that mean?
So task list, okay, so this is in the command line interface, you have the task list command. And what that does is that returns the PID number. So it'll give you a list of processes with their PID number. So it's returning you a list. And then it's the Taskkill command. So if you typed in Taskkill and then using that process ID, it uses the process ID specifically to identify which application to shut down.
I see, depending on the command.
Yes.
Got it.
So, yeah. So, I mean, you look at it this way. What they're saying is the Taskkill command. So Taskkill specifically task list is the command you're typing in. So that's the command. And it gives you a list of PID numbers. Taskkill is your command. And then you would use that PID you just got to shut down or kill the process that's frozen, that's not responding.
Got it. I guess the word is the kill and list is the what I need to look for.
Yeah. So just lists your tasks. Kill shuts down whatever task you're talking about.
Okay.
All right. All right, BIOS. It's a wonderful first line tool. Most of them include some diagnostic tools in there for various components. So you can do rudimentary tests on them to see if they're functioning properly and everything's going good. Keeping your most current version of the firmware on the PC can sideline multiple problems, although, as we have talked about multiple times, flashing your BIOS or updating the firmware is probably one of the most stressful things, because that is when your computer is most at risk, is when you're performing these updates. So it's kind of one of those, you may not update every single version, but whenever there are major security upgrades or major tool upgrades, that's when you typically might do this kind of stuff. If you own a gaming console, you have no choice. They just kind of push it whenever they want, and it can brick your device. I have experienced this personally. I am still mourning it. Still sensitive subject. So frontline diagnostics can be performed in your BIOS UEFI. I highly encourage all of you to at least attempt to get into the BIOS UEFI on your personal computers, just so you can experience it live going into it. You don't necessarily need to go in and change anything around, but go in and look around, see how it moves. Tell me whether or not you have a full-blown BIOS or a UEFI on your system. Which one do you have? That is your homework for the weekend. Tell me whether your system has a UEFI or a BIOS. Some of you may be able to tell me that right now, but in general, it's a good one to know. Just gets you practice on getting into it when you need to, and testing it out. Of course not, Susan. We think this is a college course, like, oh, all you got to do tonight is just do one little task. No, 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 no. We have expectations of very late nights, very early mornings. Insomnia is a must. Can you have both? All right. Next, memory diagnostics. So it is one of those methods to start the utility. Use one of the methods to start the utility. You have the CLI in your command prompt. You type in the Windows command mdsched.exe, and it will run memory diagnostics. If the Windows desktop will not load, press the spacebar during the boot, and you should be able to select memory diagnostic right there from the drag down menu, and it will go ahead and perform this.
Hey, Kelly.
Yes, sir.
Stephen had a question about whether or not a system computer can have both the BIOS and the UEFI.
No.
That is a yes. It's not? Okay.
I do not
It's
believe
not
it can,
possible?
no, because it's what it
Okay.
is you have one for one type of system, and then UEFI is the upgraded version of that. So there would not be a need to have both,
Okay. All right.
because UEFI is the modern replacement for the old
For
school
the BIOS,
BIOS.
right? But what would happen if you had a system that needed to access, say, an older system? It wouldn't be able, both of them would not be able to reside on the same computer. As far as accessing, say, some legacy hardware or something like that.
The UEFI may have backward compatibility to communicate.
Okay, backwards compatibility, right? Okay. Got it, Stephen?
So, but as far as having both on the same system, it would be a bit redundant. So yeah, the BIOS UEFI would be pretty specific. It's yes and no to the motherboard. But again, remember it is very, very basic programming. I would say it's more specific to the chip manufacturer than the particular motherboard itself, because it's going off of the infrastructure of the chip manufacturer, and there's only like 2 or 3 major ones currently, I believe. So, but they can communicate with each other. It's utilized a lot in memory diagnostics and forensics as well. All right. So if you cannot boot from the hard drive, boot from the Windows Setup DVD. If you have it, USB, if you have it, or you can make one pretty easily. And then you would click Repair Your Computer from the boot menu, and then click Windows Memory Diagnostic, and it'll run that system for you, which is kind of nice. It identifies problems with your memory and eliminates memory as a problem source. So if the memory is not your problem, you can move on to the next potential culprit in the triaging of that problem. SFC or System File Checker. Main purpose is to protect your system files and keeps the cache current, or cache if you like. Automatically verifies your system files after a reboot to see if they were changed, if there are any changes made to unprotected copies. All right, so you would run SFC in elevated command prompt. How you would do that is in Windows 10, you would click on that little gear. When it comes up and it says command line, you would right click on it and then say run as administrator. And then you may have to put in your administrator password to be able to do this. But if you are not running as an administrator, it is not going to happen. So, and then your command you would put in is SFC /scan now. And if the files are corrupted and they're located, the Windows setup DVD will restore those files to their original state. And as DW says, automatically. All right. If SFC won't run using the above command, try the command SFC /scan once. So those are two different approaches in the CLI to get it to go. And it will scan files immediately after the next reboot. Yes, DW. You're still muted if you're talking.
Sorry, I was talking.
No problem. I couldn't see your face, so I couldn't even get the emotion from it. So like I was completely blind. There we go.
Yeah, is the only way to run SFC from the command prompt?
Well, I mean, it's from the command prompt or from the boot disk.
From boot disk. So from the BIOS, you mean?
No. So like you're having issues with Windows, you can put in the DVD repair that you would get with your operating system typically.
The actual physical.
Yeah, actual physical boot disk.
Okay.
So you put that in and then it'll load up that Windows recovery menu, and then you would say like restore files, or you can go straight into command prompt and you can do SFC scan now or SFC scan /scan once.
So is SFC scan now and SFC scan once essentially the same thing, but like a different way to access it?
Well, scan now will run that scan right now. Scan
and
once
then,
will run it upon the next reboot.
Oh, okay. I see the difference. Thank you.
They're slightly different.
Okay.
But it's going to run the same scan, but it would be versus now versus once. No, that would not necessarily be part of regular maintenance. You can do it if you're starting to see issues, but typically you're not going to see people doing this like once a quarter or once a month, something like that. This is typically when you see issues, that is when you would go to this. Yes, Cynthia.
So with the scan once, let's say it's like pre-programmed. So let's say you fixed the problem with just like the using the Windows DVD repair, but let's say you didn't fix it, right? And then you use the scan once. Now that, like, for instance, if it scans once and it reboots, but let's say it doesn't reboot and you fix it somehow, but yet you already put in the command and you turn off your computer and you turn it back on, would the scan once happen if there's something that happens to the computer that you're not aware, and when you shut off the computer and when you turn it on, it goes into the reboot? Does that ever happen?
Not that I'm aware of, but I mean, even if you've say you've corrected that problem,
Yeah.
if the problem has been corrected and you go into the scan, it should cause no issues.
Okay.
Because it's just looking to see if anything's out of place. And if you've corrected it and there's nothing out of place, it's not going to cause a problem.
Okay.
But what it's looking for is files that have been altered, deleted, renamed, or moved.
Got it. Thank you.
Because these are things that viruses and malware will do, is they'll go in, if they can get into these files, they'll move them to another location where essentially when the system goes to boot up a system, it can't locate that file anymore and it causes a catastrophic failure.
Yeah, the reason why I ask is because like viruses are really sneaky. So it's like, you think you don't have a virus, but you do.
Yep.
And then, so that's why I asked. Okay, cool.
Kind of like in real life, a good virus is one that the host is unaware of.
Right, exactly.
Because then it allows itself to replicate and move on even further. So. All right, questions.
Glenn had a question.
Yes, Glean.
Can these same troubleshooting steps be used to stop a virus or malware?
Well, the 7 or the 6 troubleshooting steps would be how you would diagnose a virus, but there is malware remediation steps, which we will get into a little bit later. So that is a thing as well. So when we start getting into that, there are specific steps you will take to remediate malware in your system. But yeah, the troubleshooting steps will help diagnose that. And there's specific things you will look for, symptoms of a virus, which we will get into. There's like 5 or 6 symptoms, I believe. One of them is slow system performance. You talking about system files, Stephen? Or are you just talking about files in general? Is it yes to both? Yes, there are different ways you can repair files, but typically we'll start with, the most basic and direct form, which would be system file checker. All right, logs. So all operating systems, as we have stated before, collect information about events that have occurred and that are stored in your log files. And it may be any programs that were executed, loaded, deleted, anytime these applications were opened, all that kind of fun stuff. Everything is kept in a log. If the system freezes up, locks up, crashes, any of that stuff, that is also logged. So they're typically log files for different components, such as your security log, application log, system log. And then when you start getting into networking and stuff, there's a whole slew of them. And then you'll have ways of aggregating these logs so that you can kind of correlate everything. And being able to match up times correctly, all that kind of fun stuff. So these files can be used to troubleshoot operating system issues and events that are related to this. They're usually in the logs. All right. And where do we locate all this stuff? Event viewer. Good example. It's clues to a mystery. All right. System recovery options. Here's a good look at it right here. We looked at this one a little bit before. You can jump right into the command prompt. You can do startup repair, system image recovery if you have what's called a clean image or a golden image, one that has already been preset with everything that you need for the system. Could be, one that is hardened where like ports are turned off, so there's not outside access. Certain applications are uploaded. All settings are completely set the way you want them. You could use this section to upload that image. And then you have, system restore, which will bring it back to factory settings, but we'll erase everything that is on there and you starting from a blank slate. So startup repair serves as kind of a do-it-all option. Repairs corrupted registry by accessing the backup copy in the hard drive, which is in the repair partition. It will restore your critical boot files, system files, roll back any non-working drivers, uninstall any incompatible service packs and patches. Goes ahead and runs your check disk, runs a memory test. So it kind of runs through all of these sections at once, kind of cleaning up the majority of issues. System restore enables you to go back to the point when the computer was working properly. So you can pick a point in time, or it can be all the way back to 0, and many malware will infect your system restore files, so they become essentially useless. So an off computer backup is critical for situations like this, so you do not lose those key files. Yes, I can go back right here. Let me know when you're good, DW. All right. All right, system image recovery. So again, you have that image backup, that, you know, clean or golden image. You can install it from this point, which is kind of nice, especially in an enterprise environment. Puts everything the way it should be. All settings are set the way they need to be. And typically you're going to be operating off of these clean images. And then as patches and stuff come out, you'll test them against your systems, make sure everything still works properly, and then you'll be updating your images to coincide with that. Repair disk allows you to recover a computer and bring it back to the point where it was when it was new. Can only be used to reinstall the operating system on the PC. And Windows Backup and Restore tool allows you to create a system repair disk in Windows 7. If you're going to do that, you open Backup and Restore by clicking the Start button, click Control Panel, and then click System and Maintenance, and then clicking Backup and Restore. And then in the left pane, create a system repair disk, and then follow the steps. If you're prompted for an administrator password, or confirm, and then type the password in to provide confirmation. Always a good thing to do, just to have as a fail-safe for your system. Yes, this would be a last resort. All right, next, Windows 32 and 64-bit patches. Guidelines when reading error messages related to Windows. If you see the term x86, that refers to a 32-bit CPU and operating system. Why do they use x86? I'm not exactly sure. It could be the year that they came up with the 32-bit operating system. For whatever reason, that is why what they've applied to a 32-bit. When it gets to 64-bit, the term x86/64, it also may refer to a 64-bit operating system if you see x64. So that's an easy one. If you see the other one, just know it's 32. You have x64 coincides with 64-bit. The other one, which was x86, is your 32. Now, IA64 would refer to an Intel processor. And then the x64 is the operating system. So for a 32-bit installation of Windows, obviously you would need to go with a 32-bit patch, device driver, or an application. 64-bit must get a 64-bit device driver, but the application could be a 32-bit or a 64-bit application. All right, boot to safe mode. Safe mode starts up Windows, but loads only the very basic non-vendor specific drivers for mouse and keyboard, storage, and system services, along with resolution for your monitor. So it looks very much like a much older version of Windows when you're operating in it. So once you're in safe mode, tools such as Device Manager can be used to locate and correct the source of the problem. Questions? All right. MS Config. Wonderful program. MS Config utility helps troubleshoot startup problems by allowing you to selectively disable individual items that are normally executed during startup. Like we were saying, most applications, when you install them, out of convenience for you, tends to load itself into the startup menu so that it will boot up and be ready for you every time you start up your computer. Over time, this slows things down. So it's always good to go in and clean this up every now and again, turn off any programs you don't use day to day, and you'll have to start them up manually. It may take you a couple extra seconds, but your system will boot significantly faster. So works in most versions of Windows. Although the interface window you would use is slightly different because they like to move things around a little bit just to keep us in the job. And then finally, there is no menu command for this utility. So you use the start, run, and then type in msconfig in your search and then press enter. So msconfig. The all dreaded command prompt. Unless you grew up with DOS, then it's okay. Command prompt essentially allows you to run multiple utilities. It is launched by in the run prompt in the start menu, typing in CMD, or you can type out command, but CMD is just so much easier. So you type in CMD, it'll pull it up where you can boot into it. And if you want to use as administrator, you're going to elevate the command prompt. You do this by right clicking on the CMD icon, and in the drop down menu, it'll say run as administrator. Select that, put in your administrator password, and then you'll have elevated privileges while working in the command prompt. You can still do a lot of troubleshooting in command prompt without having the administrative access. There's just certain functions you will not be able to do if you don't have it. So we will be getting into command line and all that kind of fun stuff in a later one. We'll be talking about a bunch of diagnostic tools you can use, like netstat, trace routes, ping, all that kind of fun stuff. So we will be diving into that into later sessions. If you're running, Stephen, like some things like file system checker or system file checker, it may not let you run that if you are, it will not let you run that if you're not running in administrative privileges. But if I wanted to say ping my DNS server or trace route between me and Google, I can run those functions, but I can't do, things that would change the system on a core level without having that access. So there are certain things that will be blocked if you don't have administrative access. We had a lot of fun with that when we were working on the college, because they would get mad when we would start testing certain things in command line because it would start setting off their warnings in the IT department. So that was always kind of entertaining. They would, security would pop by and check on us every now and again when we were working on that stuff. Although the most entertaining was had to do with what's called a keylogger, which is a virus type program that logs every key that's punched on a system. One of the guys that was in my class did server work for the gambling rooms that you see popping up around, like they have the fish tables and the poker room gambling machines and stuff like that. He actually installed servers for a lot of these places. And so when he was dealing with his servers, like when he was installing his servers, he would put keyloggers in there just to make sure they weren't going in and changing settings on his servers. Well, he had that on his USB that he also used for school, and he plugs it in at school, and quite literally the head of IT security and second in command showed up at our classroom within under 5 minutes. And they were like, somebody's installing a virus on our system from that machine and pointing at him. So it was a pretty quick response. And what was pretty funny was my instructor for that one. He's like, you know what? I've been here for a couple of years. That's the first time I've ever met those people. So it was pretty entertaining, kind of put us on the map for that program. All right. So we will get into command lines in a future technical session here in a little bit. We should now be able to identify some common issues that come up with Windows, describe how to resolve them using some appropriate troubleshooting tools. I do encourage you to practice these a little bit. Thankfully, in Test Out, it gives you the opportunity to run a lot of this stuff. And you can run in command lines in the sandbox, play around with it, do your best to break the machines in there, figure out how to fix them. And if you get too far gone, you can always restart the application. So that's the fun part about the sandbox. But other than that, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, revelations? Sandbox is in Test Out. It is chapter 14. They will give you a sandbox that is of a whole office that has different types of computers in there. And you can even go into the server room and play around with some of the hardware in there too. So kind of cool. You can get in there. You can do all kinds of stuff with networking and command line, messing around with systems in there. It's a lot of fun. And it really, really helps you get comfortable with a lot of these command prompts. Yes, Karen, or Jessica, excuse me.
Just to confirm, when you were talking about administrative access, how you'll need administrative access to gain, to be able to set, to implement certain prompts. Just to confirm, when you get to that point, it's simply just going to ask you for like an administrative password and allow you to keep going through, right? Or is that something you would have to first implement before you go to that area?
Okay, so it depends on what system or tool you're using. So if you know you're going to be utilizing administrative level tools in command prompt, you have to initiate that before you open it. You can always close out and then reopen in an administrative level command prompt if you want. There are other functions and tools if you try to use them depending on your group policies and stuff like that. Yes, it just requires you to punch in your administrative password and then you can go along your merry way.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So are you asking if all the options will be available in the sandbox, Julian? Trying to understand the question. Yes. Yes, you'll be able to do a lot of this stuff in the sandbox. So it pretty much gives you open access to mess around and do a lot of stuff. You know, and I encourage you to go around and like ping other computers and just, you know, mess around with some of these tools. But again, we'll be getting some more command line prompts as we go, but you can go in and do the system file checker. You can do a lot of this stuff just in the sandbox setup. Right. With that, we conclude